Hi, happy Monday. I always love logging on Mondays to sit down and chat about a different topic every week concerning some of the things that really do impact a marriage, not only on a day to day basis and not only when you're financially planning or just making a plan for you and your marriage, but also divorce, right? It's kind of all these different situations in which these topics can come into play for your relationship. A lot of people think that when I talk about prenups, I'm kind of just promoting, a plan for divorce or brainstorming ways for one party to have a better outcome than the other. And at the end of the day, it couldn't be more opposite, right? When I think about premarital planning, when I think about prenups, I'm thinking about, well, what kinds of decisions do you need to make during your marriage? And how is the financial arrangement going to make that easier on the two of you, make it harder on the two of you? And so the more that you can talk about those things early on, right, before you get married, preferably, but early on in the marriage, and understand how things work, the less fear, stress, and unknowns you're going to have. And so today, what we're going to talk about is kind of three things to know when you or your spouse are self employed and how that impacts certain financial things and decisions during marriage and in the event of divorce. It comes up a lot, obviously, in the context of divorce because we're trying to figure out what is each person's income. Is there a value to this business that we need to address? Are there assets within the business that the parties are each entitled to? What is the interest of the non-business owner spouse, right? That's the assessment of the financial picture in the event of divorce. But knowing some of these things before you get married, if you have a partner who's self-employed, or if you've planned to start a business or you think that might be in the future for either one of you, there's benefits that are often overlooked. And there's also some things that they're not concerns as much as they are things that you should know about so you can craft a plan for your relationship that best suits the goals that each of you have. So, first thing we're going to talk about is retirement. Retirement when you're self-employed is a little bit different. Now, a lot of this is going to depend on what you choose as a business owner to implement into your business and whether or not, you're just kind of a solo business owner, you don't have any employees, it's just you, or whether or not you are a business owner of a company or other professional service that has employees. So many different factors are going to come into play when you decide, right, what is the right plan for you. But a huge benefit of being self-employed is that you can set up certain retirement plans that allow you to contribute much more than the maximum 401k contributions or even an IRA contribution. And for 2024, I think the limits for 401k as an employee or a contributor is 23,000. And first thing I'll say is just, keeping that in mind as we walk through these different topics and different points. But obviously, if you're a business owner considering opening a business, consult an expert in retirement plans to help set up the one that's going to maximize not only your employment benefits, your retirement investment options, but also possibly consulting your CPA as far as tax benefits. Because all of that's going to make a difference when it comes to selecting the right one for you. But I'm kind of going to talk a little bit in what my personal experience is. I have a business partnership in California. I have, a number of employees. And so we've set up a plan that benefits both myself and my business partner as the owners, but also gives flexibility to our employees. So we have a 401k plan that we offer our employees, and we're kind of given two options, right? We're given an option of a safe harbor plan, which is just kind of an automatic default percentage that we contribute based on the specific employee's annual salary. So, 3% of your annual salary, we contribute to an account on behalf of our employee, regardless of whether they contribute or not. And that also means we get to contribute that same amount to our accounts as the owners. So that's on top of the 23,000 that we get to put aside as the individual business owner and contributor to our plan. The alternative to that is like a matching. So a lot of employers match whatever their employees contribute. It encourages participation. And so you can kind of do it either way. We just do the safe harbor. And so on top of that, so now we have, let's say 3% of our income that we get to contribute on top of the 23,000. You can also add in a profit sharing. So if you have a good year and you have extra net income from revenues left over after you pay your bills, set aside money, pay all your employees, you can add a profit sharing. Yes, you also have to share this with your employees, but you get to share it with yourself on top of all of these things. And so it allows you to go over and above that 23,000 and build retirement accounts at a much higher rate than just a W-2 employee. Now, why does this matter if you're getting married? Well, if you're a business owner and you utilize these tools in a community property state like California, if you don't have a prenup, all the funds that your business is generating that are going into that retirement account are going to be subject to community property division for anything that was earned during the marriage. And on top of that, if you were generating that income as a business owner and adding to that account, but your spouse is only a W-2 employee and was only able to contribute that 23,000 or whatever the max is for those ongoing years, then there could be an imbalance, right, between each of your retirement accounts. And so that piece of it is really helpful to know because it's going to, one, allow the two of you as a couple to plan how to maximize your retirement savings through both spouses' plans, depending on what you have. And also recognize that there is going to be possibly one spouse who has a much bigger retirement plan than the other. Now, the same could be said that if the W-2 employee had both matching and maxed out their 401k contributions, but as a self-employed business owner, maybe you didn't actually maximize. And so the W-2 employees could be a lot bigger. However that works out, there just could be an imbalance that as two working spouses, you need to be aware of and how that's going to make you feel. Some people say, well, if I earned it from my earnings, I want to be able to keep it for myself and then they can keep their own retirement plans. That's fine. Premarital agreements, especially in California, can allow you to do that. And in some states, that's the law anyway. But it's figuring out what that means for your marriage and what the law is so that you can craft the right plan, right? Because retirement accounts are great ways to build wealth for a marriage, and they can help you and your partner make decisions about where your money goes on a regular basis, how to maximize that investment strategy. But you do need to talk about how much cash flow you want, right, to put in your bank account versus your retirement account. And as a business owner, this is really important because money that you're paying into a retirement account isn't necessarily flowing through to you as taxable income, and it's not showing up as income for the business. It's showing up as an expense of the business. And so from an income perspective, that could be a consideration, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about income. So having those conversations about how you're going to operate and how to maximize your investments for you and your marriage is really important. So retirement planning is kind of that first one. As a business owner, understanding how that works out, and also making sure your spouse has an understanding of what the investment strategies are. The second thing that's really important to discuss when either you or your partner is self-employed is, what is their income really? I talk to so many people who are getting married who tell me their partner is self-employed, and they so often have no idea how much their partner makes. Not even a range or a guess. They can tell me what they do and their hours, but generally beyond that, the financial kind of stability of their business or how much money it generates, often they don't have a lot of answers. So making sure that you discuss what your income is as a business owner beyond just, this is what comes into my bank account, right? So when someone is self-employed, there's some things that you should ask and some things that you should disclose. First is, how do you get paid? Do you take a salary, right? However your business is structured, you could take a salary where it actually shows up on a pay stub. You could just get distributions to pull from an account whenever you want. Or if you have a business partner, maybe that's structured a little bit more formally. Is it a set amount? Meaning, again, do you get a salary? Is it the set amount every month or is it something different? Or is it monthly? Do you have yearly bonuses based on how well the business did that year? What do you run through the business and versus what do you pay yourself separately? When you own a business, there are certain expenses that are going to have some crossover. And some things can be run through the business. Maybe the business pays your cell phone. Maybe the business pays for your car, certain insurance, internet, if you have a home office. There's all these different things that you can legally run through a business that can impact what your income would actually be. There's also things that you can illegally run through your business that business owners can take advantage of. And so having that heightened sense of understanding about the fact that you might have a partner that's self-employed, and just the fact that that could happen is just important to know, not in a way to use it against them in the future, but it's important to know because in the event of divorce, that fact might be important. Again, I'm going to talk about retirement options, and I kind of hinted at this when I was talking about retirement plans and how it impacts income is if you have a business where you are really funneling a lot of money into retirement and therefore taking less of a salary from your business, that can, again, show up as an expense for the business in a lot of places, but not necessarily, and not income for you. So you could say, oh, I make $10,000 a month, but really you're putting an extra $4,000 a month on average through the year in a retirement account on your behalf. So you actually make $14,000 a month. And that's a big difference over the course of a year, even in the course of a month. And so this is one aspect on top of what I was just talking about with the funneling, personal expenses through the business. Those are two key things in the event of divorce that take a lot of high level understanding of running a business and also understanding your partner's business. Because if we're talking about child support or spousal support in the event of divorce, depending on who the higher earning spouse is, there can be incentive to make your income look as low as possible. And these are some tricks that I've seen used over the years for people that are trying to get out of either paying more or trying to get more from their other spouse by claiming that their income is less than it actually is. And there are strategies depending on what state you live in and what the law says about adding this money back in. And so even if you're a business owner and you think this is going to work out for you and you're going to be able to hide it, some people have been successful in hiding it. You've probably heard it many times. It's some of the horror stories of divorce and how difficult it can be to find money for self-employed individuals. But for the most part, we're going to be able to figure it out because we're going to look at bank statements, we're going to look at credit card statements, and we're going to look at cash flow, and something's not going to add up. So it's really important to understand kind of just a little bit of high level what's going on with your partner's business. Ask questions. You don't have to be intrusive or interrogating, but you should feel very comfortable discussing the finances of your business with your significant other. Now, if you have a business partner, some of those financial decisions, of course, aren't necessarily going to be made with your partner, with your significant other, but with your business partner. Doesn't mean that they can't be a part of the conversation because the financial decisions that you make for your business are obviously going to impact them as well. But things to look out for is if your significant other does their own bookkeeping, own accounting, those are the situations where I find people taking more liberties with their business than somebody who has a dedicated CPA, a bookkeeper, because all of those people are going to be subject to their own set of rules and ethics on top of that, and they're not going to be willing to just fudge the books for anybody. So these are just things to be aware of. How they impact your relationship or your marriage could be vastly different than the other couple right down the block. It's really just about making sure that everybody feels comfortable with what's going on and asking questions and and making sure that you understand the dynamics of a business. The third thing we're going to talk about is evaluation of a business. So this is going to be very state specific and even industry specific, meaning there's different valuation methods for different types of businesses, service-based business, product businesses, a company where they're shareholders. All of these things are going to impact how you value a business. But things like understanding if the business was created during the marriage, before the marriage, sorry, if a business was created before the marriage, that doesn't mean that that business has no community or joint interest. The state law is going to tell you whether that's the case, because the business could have grown substantially during the marriage. Therefore, the law of your state considers that aspect of the growth a joint asset that can be subject to valuation and therefore subject to division, or generally what we call a buyout of the business. And the same is true is if the business was created during the marriage, right? If you create the business during the marriage, well, then it was built during the marriage, it grew during the marriage, and your state laws are also going to have a lot to say about how you value and divide that business and who gets what from it. And so it's not like you're going to be able to know 100% the value of a business at any point, right? It's varies year by year. You could have a business that's worth $1 million at the time you get married, and it's worth, 10 million, $1 billion by the time you're getting divorced. Or the business could actually, reduce its overall revenue and go down in value during the marriage. On top of the fact that there are some businesses that are substantially focused on the person doing the work, a professional service, right? If you're an electrician, you're not making money unless you're actually working. And from that, you also get a salary. And so the valuation is not always going to be your salary or, the gross revenue of a year times by so many years, depending on the state and the formula that they use to value the business. So there's a lot of different factors. But you have to understand what that means in the event of divorce to be able to make decisions either before you get married or during your marriage that are going to make sense for the two of you, not for anybody else. Remember, we're not talking about anybody else. We're always talking about what's right for the two of you in your marriage. These are just considerations compiled from a number of different relationships and how it impacts them. You may need to hire an expert in the event of divorce to value the business. Sometimes you each get your own expert, which can be even more expensive, plus the lawyers that are involved to argue both sides of why the valuation should be higher, why the valuation should be lower, what factors will the court consider when determining what the value of this particular business should be. And so that's something that has to come into play, and you have to consider as an expense in and of itself in the event of divorce. So knowing that, especially if the business grows substantially, then there's a lot more to fight about. And if movies and celebrity divorces have taught us anything, if there's money on the table, somebody's going to try to get it, right? More often than not, there's money on the table. Somebody's going to try to go get a piece of it. Now, if they lose, they lose. They have to balance, what is the cost? Do I have enough money to fight this issue, knowing that I could lose? Or what is the financial benefit if I win? And how do I make a decision about the risk involved in arguing something like this? And businesses we've seen, people have startups and they get married and they don't really have a lot of money. They're living in small apartments. They, are barely scraping by. And by the time the divorce comes around, they have billions of dollars, right? And so you might not be able to predict every little thing. And sometimes it's okay to say, we want to grow this business together. I'm growing this business during my marriage, and if at the end of the day we get divorced and I have to share this business with my spouse, so be it. That may be the right decision for your relationship. But you can also come up with a plan for how to value something that eliminates expensive experts and eliminates some litigation. Meaning you can say, okay, I have this startup business. I've invested this much money in this much time. And on a yearly basis, I'm going to be spending this much time continuing to grow it. it's worth about this much right now. You can get it valued at the time of marriage. If it doesn't have any valuation because it's that new, then obviously that's not the method you're going to use here. And you can say, okay, the max amount that the non-business owning spouse will get from this business is the current number times 5, the current number times 10. However you want to calculate it, or just come up with a number and say it, and no matter how much the business is worth, you only get $100,000. I buy you out of the business and you go on your way. You can come up with a mechanism for trying to calculate that where both people feel like they're being compensated for what occurred during the marriage, but you're not fighting over how to do that. And the person that might be trying to get that money on the table is already going to have an agreement that you outlined and signed when things were good. And unless they have a very specific reason for why that provision of a premarital agreement, right, should be set aside, and I can tell you, people think it's more common. It's not that common. It's really hard to set aside a premarital agreement that's done right, meaning with lawyers following the procedural laws of the state. You just eliminate so many arguments, especially if you have kids. That's a lot of conflict that you're eliminating. In reality, somebody might have gotten more if it would have been subject to the state laws. That's something you have to be willing to accept. You made a deal. Sometimes one person benefits more from that deal, and that has to be okay because there's also other benefits, non-monetary, meaning the time, the emotion, the stress that litigation in a divorce can put on you and your children and your family. Then there's some financial, yes, attorney's fees arguing it, the money you could have gotten, what that would do for your life, right? And so it's a balancing act of what the right mechanism is for you and how to create a plan. But you can come up with this plan before and eliminate so many headaches along the way. Now, if you don't have a plan, again, the law is going to drive that process for you. And sometimes you can utilize mediation and come up with a plan for how to value the business. You each get a valuation, you propose the number, you split the difference, right? You say, that's our mechanism. That can also be a plan in your prenup. Some people also think that just because you have a prenup, it has to be very specific into what the numbers are going to be. You can have methods for resolving conflict, just like in the event there's a business that has to be valued, we agree that we each will obtain our own experts within this many days of filing or this many days, some trigger point, right? And we will exchange those reports. If those reports are within X percent, we agree to take, the lower of the two, higher of the two, or if they're further apart, then we agree to split the difference, and that's the number. They each got to pick their own experts who came up with the number, and we kind of have a mechanism for avoiding court and litigation and making lawyers rich, right? So just understanding that there's this process for valuing businesses in the event of divorce can help you avoid not only the expense and stress in the divorce part, but also help you better understand what's happening while your spouse is building this business during the marriage. If your spouse is building a business and it's not really going anywhere, well, maybe they're making income from it. And so even if the business isn't worth a lot, the income that they're generating is enough for you guys to do what you're going to do. That's okay because you have an understanding of how the business works and how it might be valued in the event of divorce. So any stressors that are on the relationship, neither one person's working a lot, one person's not generating, as much income as they used to, whatever the circumstances are, you have an understanding of what that all means, not just in the event of divorce, but what that means from the partnership you're building. And in my mind, in my marriage, right, I use this example. So I have a business, I have multiple businesses I'm building. I'm building them for the benefit of my family and my husband. That was our choice. We discussed how we were going to build our lives, our careers, the things that we were going to spend time on. So because my husband knows that these things are joint assets, he has also some understanding that the time I spend away working and building on my business are benefiting him and our child. So there's less resentment there. So whatever the factors are that are going to come into play, it's not always about, well, what happens in the event of divorce. More often than not, it's just about how does this strengthen our relationship and help us understand each other more. So, either you or your partner is self-employed, I highly recommend talking to an experienced premarital agreement lawyer before you say I do. You can also go to my Marry Me Smart page. I will link it below on my page and learn more about my premarital planning course, which right now, if you click the link that will be under here, is $200 off, so only $197 this week. And I want you guys to be able to take advantage. Well, it was another great Monday evening. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you next week.